Okay, ang ating pangatlong bahagi, ang tema RP, ang Pilipinas ba, stuck in the Cold War? Ano? Nakatali ba tayo doon sa Cold War pa ng 1950s? Before, just as we were breaking, we were talking about all these strategic issues. At bawat bansa may institution na nag-iisip ng 25-50 years. Ano? And when Hero was discussing, I said that I follow the Indian Strategic Institute or something. London has its Institute for International, what's that? Royal Institute for International Affairs. And then CFR, Council of Foreign Relations, you could say that, no? But the CSIS, RAND, and so on. China has its Academy of Social Sciences, which is its biggest think tank, no? And so on. Ang Pilipinas, meron bang strategic institute? Sabi mo, sa Lasal, you're setting up one. But that's a university institution. Chito.
Ang UP, they're trying also to set up a think tank. In a sense, yung Association for Philippine Studies is like we're trying to be a resource person, pero a think tank too. Pero sa atin nga, driven more by individuals. There was an attempt before by Almonte, as you know, during Marcos.
Paano ni Marcos?
Pero na yan, no? So it's driven more in a sense by universities. Sa government, there's an effort sa FSI.
But dito na nga, ay mas bilib ang mga mamamayan kay Pacquiao kaysa kay Chito Santaramana, Richard Darian.
Mas malo yung vaccine kaysa.
Oo. Sabi ko nga doon sa mga kausap ko sa radyo, kung sana yung mga radio stations ang pinag-usapan, strategic issues, at hindi yung mga love affairs and ng mga movie stars and so on, will go somewhere. But there is no national strategic sense for the entire country.
Right.
I think when I talk to Indians and the Chinese, you can feel that even down to the lowest individual, meron silang sense na may pinupuntahan kami.
Well, you have to understand, Tong, that since 1946, the Philippine government has defaulted economic policy to the U.S. government.
And then foreign policy.
And that will follow foreign policy. Foreign policy will follow your economic policy. Today, essentially, we have defaulted, obviously, our self-defense exterior.
Binigay na natin, ha? Baka default, baka hindi maintindihan ng iba. Binigay na natin sa kano.
So
every Pinoy and foreign policy.
And because of these movies, every Pinoy believes that Clint Eastwood and Sly Stallone will lead the U.S. Marines against the Chinese. They have this fairy tale.
Iba na, luma ka na, George Clooney na, sino. Okay.
And we have this, we defaulted. Justice Carpio came out and say, we have neglected self-defense. You neglected self-defense because you neglected economic policy, financial policy, savings. How do you build up a credible economy? How can you even think of self-defense forces when you have defaulted economic policy?
When you won't have the money ever again.
Again, the history of U.S. policy towards the Philippines post-liberation.
And I think citing Carpio is who's very characteristic of the Filipino intelligentsia. Split level ang utak. No?
Walang pa. And when you see the ambassador of the U.S. saying, we want to help the Philippines with strategic
Richard Gumiti, when I said refer to Carpio, we'll go back to that later.
Somebody should tell the ambassador, he says, you took away all our resources, and now you're asking, you want to help us. That's a crack, okay? So essentially, U.S. policy towards the Philippines and Japan, they had to support Japan because of the Cold War. For us, they said, no need. Let us continue to maintain our bases, etc. Remember, the change came in 1948-49 when the communists took over China. And they continued supporting the nationalists.
Otherwise, if
Taiwan.
the communists did not take over China, we may have had the chance for industrialization, development, and
Who
so
knows?
On. We don't know. Okay, we'll go to Chito, because Chito was raising a finger. I don't know the finger was to scold me or what.
yung kung stuck ba tayo sa Cold War?
Sa Cold War,
Ang tingin ko, definitely noong 50s, 60s, we were basically with the U.S. There was a brief shining moment when the Philippines moved towards
even
some trend.
Even Macapagal, no? Macapagal tried to go Filindo
Pero it
and
became
so
pronounced after the People Power Revolution. And the height of that was yung decision to close the bases. Tapos, ngayon, after that, ang problema, after Mischief Reef, and then ngayon, lalo na, bumabalik sa Cold War. Pero, ang Cold War ngayon kasi, hindi na anti-Soviet. No? Ngayon, ang direksyon ng Cold War, at least in the regional level, China. So you have the US-Japan alliance, and then the Philippines is proudly joining that, no? The two strategic partners. Ang problema lang doon sa direksyon na tinatahak natin, pagtitiwalaan ba tayo ng ibang ASEAN countries, no? Mga kapit bayan natin, no? Indonesia, Malaysia, no? The others. So this is where I think the Filipino leadership has to be very clear. Kasi our future, in a sense, the options we have are more than just sticking to US and Japan. We can have the friendship with the US and Japan, the traditional friendship, but we should try to be friends with all major powers. No? Lalo na, since the trend of the future is na palakas ng palakas ang China, relatively, nagde-decline ng US, we can't afford na nakakabit lang tayo.
And by the way, the news came out 2 or 3 days ago that North Korea's fortunes may change with a discovery of 6 times bigger rare earth reserves than China, which controls 90% of the market today. You know? But this is how things can change.
Things can change depending on the economic.
Let's go to Richard.
I think Cold War may not be even the best analogy. Soviet Union was never the economic power that China is. I mean, look at Southeast Asia. China is a top trading partner of everyone. And with the IIB and Maritime Silk Road Initiative, China will be the huge source of capital for infrastructure spending investment, which is crucial to long-term economic development. So we cannot really draw a parallel between Soviet Union and China in that sense.
Okay.
And this is where the problem arises, because China obviously has economic leverage over Southeast Asia, but we want to make sure that that economic leverage will not be used to extract concessions on territorial issues, which are sensitive to everyone. I would always want to say, I understand that the Chinese people have this sense of victimhood, but they have no monopoly over that. All of us have, even in the Middle East, people have been a victim of colonization. So right now, I think it's time for China.
It's only the Philippines that seem to embrace it up to now.
Right. I mean, we are unique.
Right.
We are unique, as I always said. We are unique in the sense that we are the only country in the entire Asia-Pacific region that does not have China as our top trading partner. And for me, that's artificial. Whether you can blame China for imposing some sort of economic siege, like investment siege, or maybe we are not reaching out enough to China, that's open to debate. But I think that's very artificial, and that could significantly change down the road.
You mentioned the Silk Road. Let's flash the picture of the Silk Road, and let's ask our economic analyst about the relevance of this to the Philippine future. No? Yung mapa ng no, that one is U.S. military and CIA intervention since World War II. We will go back to that later. The other one, the other map na may mga trade routes and so on.
Yung Xinhua News Agency.
I picked it up from many of the maps. Anyway, habang hinahanap, we'll take a look at that later. So we're here. So are we stuck? You're saying that the analogy may not be appropriate because it was very different. But we're stuck with the U.S. alliance, and we're not being creative about it. Any reaction, Hero and Richard again?
Can I go quickly on
that?
that?
Sure.
South Korea is a U.S. ally, but that has not stopped South
That's
Korea.
Right.
In fact, China right now, Korea's trade with China dwarfs its trade with Japan and U.S. combined. So just because you're a U.S. ally, that should not stop you from reaching out to them. Of course, Australia is another. And by the way, South Korea and Australia are also going to join the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So for me, let's never use the excuse of U.S. alliance.
Did any one of you come across a narrative about the U.S. Trade Secretary berating Cameron of England, of Britain?
No, it was a senior official quoted in Financial Times that said, we are tired of this trend of accommodation. Right.
Okay.
But there were
senior official of the U.S.
Of the US State
berating David Cameron?
Not necessarily. The British government.
British government.
Right.
30 minutes daw of tirade against
Someone was
Britain.
fuming, obviously. Over
but that didn't stop Britain from joining the AIIB.
Britain has its own reason because London is competing with Frankfurt to become the prime destination of Chinese investment.
R&B.
Exactly. So they
So
wanted to
yun
go
yung-
ahead of the Germans and the French. So they had their own reasons, and U.S. could not deny the British from pursuing their own national
Okay.
interests.
So I think we have our last 6 or 7 minutes. Let's focus on our relations now with China and the Philippines, no? Which I think admittedly has been misdirected. And for me, one of the concerns before Chito comes in is the anti-China propaganda that is so, I think, twisted. No? You can add to that because your smile means a lot. But let me show you this picture from 2012, front page of the Inquirer. Can you show that? Yung China ba yun? China ang title? Kasi I get the titles mixed up of the images I prepared. So, yung nagtataas ng flag. Can you see? Yeah, that one. You remember that picture, Chito?
I know.
This was presented by the Inquirer as the Chinese in 2012 or 2011 raising the
Taking
Chinese
over.
flag in Scarborough. But it turns out this is a 20-year-old or so
Yeah, it's
picture.
obvious, I mean.
And the Inquirer repeated it again several times without clarifying that this is not correct. And okay, we can come back to our panel now. This was followed by 2013, the concrete blocks that China is building that turned out to be anchors for the target practice of the U.S. military.
Navy, yeah.
It was followed by January 2014 of invasion this year imminent of Pag-asa Island or remember?
Well, that
Yeah?
was also coming from Chinese websites. in the
Well,
beginning.
yeah, I know, but that was a
They
mix-up.
used it.
And we presented it here as major news and so on. So now, the latest is Chinese firing their guns at Philippine planes, but the second report, no, they were firing flares.
Or
The
searchlights.
Searchlights ang third report. Ano? So, I feel that somebody is trying to stir up trouble between Philippines and China. I don't know if you agree, you can add to that, but I'm just telling the public to be very careful about this anti-China propaganda. So, Chito, you're going to raise an issue. You were raising your hand.
Actually, gusto kong banggitin yung Maritime Silk Road.
Maritime Silk Road.
Kasi yung
Hindi
nangyari
makahanap
sa...
yung image
okay lang.
natin. Oh.
Yung nangyari sa Pakistan, nangyari sa Iran, no? Yung with China. The Chinese are now unfolding what they call the new Silk Road strategy. Kasi according to some Chinese strategies, with the pivot, so the encirclement is coming, tawag nila C-shaped. From Japan, the Philippines, down, no? Australia. So, ang way out is papuntang Europe. So, and that goes through the desert, Central Asia. Kaya yung ganun pa direksyon. Tapos yung Maritime Silk Road is a way to try to break out along the maritime.
So,
Pero
yung
ang economic underpinning yan right now, kasi dati ang linya na there was this talk na hindi kasali yung Pilipinas because
Oo
of
nga, well,
arbitration.
ang
The
dami-
Chinese have
nine
changed gears.
9 out of 10 maps I see of the Maritime Silk Road,
Wala tayo.
wala sa Pilipinas. May pa isa-isang
Oh.
kinokonek ang Pilipinas. So I don't know what is the...
No, but the Chinese have come out.
Oh.
They want it to be inclusive, hindi exclusive. It's meant to attract, no? So and they're putting in 40 billion. So ang basic strategy nila sa Philippines, you could say, some people say jokingly, they're going to give new meaning to the term constructive engagement. Island construction plus economic engagement.
Okay.
So they will try to attract you with billions in dollars to make it ang basic gamble nila is to make it na appealing yung projects to outweigh the cost or the cost that we think we are giving up in terms of sovereignty. Of course, mahuhuli sa tingin ko ang Pilipinas yan because mahuhuli in the sense that right now the number one, as you were talking about propaganda, the number one villain sa Philippines ngayon, China. Part of it is, of course, propaganda machine ng other forces, pero part of it then are some of the mistakes, I think, of the Chinese have committed. Natakot ang tao at natakot yung leadership kaya takbo sa Amerika at patakbo sa Amerika.
Okay.
But the point is, the Chinese will unfold this through around Asia. Mahuhuli, I think, ang Philippines kasi in the sense yung kanilang island construction, reclamation, will undermine the engagement strategy nila. Because yung level of distrust, suspicion, it will take a while to get
ang
over
point
this.
ko lang doon sa island construction is that security overrides economic and other issues. And
Look,
that
the
is
Chinese
really
are showing the resolve na kahit na ano isipin nyo, we are determined to do this. The problem is, the effects sa Filipino, iba.
Well,
Fear, suspicion, at ginagamit to na.
pero kung
other forces.
nagkasundo lang sana na joint development and so on, that implies security arrangement
No,
also.
I think you'll see a revival of that offer. Because the Chinese realize na the key problem sa foreign policy nila ngayon, successful sila sa Latin America,
Well,
sa Africa, is yung maritime neighborhood. So they're trying, pero not quite succeeding yet.
No,
They're succeeding sa Central Asia and mainland Southeast Asia, yung maritime, and they will see the ASEAN summit.
Okay.
I think Malaysia may not want to offend the Chinese,
That's
but I'd
right.
want to see.
Well, pinagmamalaki ng DFA, they'll bring everything to ASEAN as if kaya nilang dalhin ASEAN, which is ridiculous.
Well, this is where yung suspicions of Philippines, because we're too close to the US will come in, or whether we can get our Southeast Asian neighbors to join.
We have 3
to
minutes
express
left.
concern. Okay.
He smiled twice.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead, please.
well, the Chinese have their propaganda, so there'll always be an counteraction for every action. And I will completely agree with Senator Roman, and there is some basis. I think China consolidating its position within paracels, which they have controlled for 4 decades, and fire cross for more than 3 decades, is something that they can, maybe acceptable to some countries, if not to us. But our concern is the possible imposition of an ADIZ. If they bring radar system and missile defense system, that's going to really affect not only supply of other features we control, but even freedom of overflight. That is the fear we have. Now, my thing is, there is calibration until there is no calibration. That's how World War I happened, right? After, from the Napoleonic concert, up until the First World, there was always jostling until there was no jostling.
Okay, we'll leave
That's my fear.
We'll leave the last minute and a half for final prescriptions. Hero, anything to add before we go into that?
China has achieved a great deal, but they have to be very cautious about, like what Richard said, miscalculating the calibration.
Yeah.
They might box themselves in and militarize those reclaimed areas. That would be a strategic mistake.
Do we see that happening immediately in the immediate future, militarizing?
Ang question really is, we're waiting now for the U.S. response and the ASEAN response. If the U.S. were to react strongly and ASEAN were to react strongly, this could be China's Ukraine. But I don't see that right now. I think medyo sumobra yung kumbaga sa ano, they didn't have to go all the way.
Correct.
Okay, actually we don't have the minute and a half. We have a few seconds left. So we'll ask the senior member of our panel, Chito, to sum up things. Are we still stuck in the Cold War? Are we in the right direction?
Are we in the right direction? Right now, it's very debatable if we're in the right direction. And I think we'll have to see the results of the tribunal, the results of the island reclamation, ASEAN unity, and the U.S. response. Then we can do a review and see, see if the wisdom of our moves. No? Right now, certainly, the results of the policy has been questionable. We lost Scarborough, and now we have the island reclamation. It's not working. So hopefully, we'll come up with another solution.
In other words, agree, talo tayo so far?
Things are bad, definitely for us, but I think they could get worse. That's why one of the things I'm pushing for is at least establish hotlines with the Chinese to make sure there's no one that
Well, I think I agree with all of them. And the very serious thing, really, that everybody should understand, be it the U.S. or China, because we are not players in this scenario, is that either side does not overreach.
Okay. Paano ba tayo magiging hindi nasaling pusa? Di ba? So that's a question we leave the audience. Mabuhay po tayong lahat kahit papano. We are trying hard.
Cute naman yung
pusa. Cute, Cute,
little
submissive. Okay. Maraming salamat and have a good weekend. Thank you very much.